In a laboratory in the United States, a couple of scientists, Clive and Elsa, are assisting in the birth of a living being. However, as soon as they remove its umbilical cord, it is revealed that this being is a new type of hybrid, created from the genetic manipulation of other animals. The little creature is born, and Elsa names it Fred, who is taken to meet another hybrid named Ginger. When they meet, they connect through their tentacles, and the two scientists, along with their team, are pleased to see that the experiment has been successful. After that, the couple goes to talk to their employers, Joan and William, to present the results. In addition to creating entirely new life forms, Clive and Elsa want to go further, mixing their DNA with human genetic material to create an even more evolved hybrid. If successful, they will be able to discover cures for diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and even cancer. However, their employers reject the idea, as they know that there are many moral and political implications that could halt the project and even shut down the company. Instead, they instruct the scientists to extract as many enzymes as possible from the hybrids to be used in the creation of new medicines. After the meeting, the couple leaves frustrated, but they decide to continue with the experiment on their own and in secret. Arriving at the lab, they spend hours testing enzymes, and after several attempts, they finally manage to combine animal and human DNA. Despite their success, Clive thinks it's best to keep everything under wraps, but Elsa takes the material to another room and puts it in a cloning machine. Clive says this is too risky, but Elsa wants to see if it is possible to generate an embryo from the combination they have created. So, with the machine activated, they begin the cloning process, but Clive warns that if the embryo develops beyond what is necessary, it must be discarded. The following night, the couple is at home enjoying a moment of rest when they receive an emergency call from the lab. They both rush there and discover that the embryo has developed at a faster rate than they expected. The hybrid is about to be born, and Elsa tries to remove the cables from the machine, but when she puts her arm inside the reservoir, the creature starts biting her hand. Quickly, Clive uses a support to destroy the glass, causing the water inside the machine to drain and managing to free Elsa. Soon after, the scientist has to cut the embryo, freeing the creature, which is shaped like a huge, aggressive worm. With no time to lose, he traps the monster inside a plastic box, but Elsa begins to feel ill and collapses. Clive then uses medication and manages to stabilize her, but the couple soon realizes the mistake they made with this experiment. Despite this, Elsa thinks it best to leave the creature inside an incubator, and the two go home, thinking about what to do next. However, Clive can't sleep, and even against his girlfriend's pleas, he decides to go back to the lab and end it all. Wearing protective suits, the two enter the room and check the incubator, but the creature isn't moving. Clive believes that the hybrid did not survive the experiment and goes to get a bag to dispose of what is left of it. Meanwhile, Elsa takes a closer look at the incubator and notices that the remains are just a cocoon, which seems to have been opened a few minutes ago. Suddenly, objects begin to move around the cabinets, and Elsa comes face to face with a small, two-legged hybrid creature. The creature runs uncontrollably around the room, and when Clive sees it through the window, he tells his girlfriend to move away, saying he will activate the sleeping gas in the room. However, the scientist realizes that the hybrid is just scared and tries to approach it, removing her protective mask and gloves. Shortly after, the creature begins to walk slowly toward her, but soon assumes a defensive position when it sees Clive approaching with an iron pipe. The scientist pulls his girlfriend away and orders the creature to back off, trapping it inside the room. With both of them outside, Clive confronts Elsa for her recklessness, saying that they don't know how dangerous this hybrid can be. However, the scientist is convinced that it will do no harm, and instead of eliminating it, she releases the sleeping gas into the room, putting the creature to sleep. With the small being under control, the two scientists begin to perform tests to assess its condition. Although it has organs similar to those of humans, the creature has a tail with a stinger, which seems to expel a type of toxin. In addition, blood tests show that its cells are developing at a faster rate than normal. This means that the hybrid will be lifeless soon, and for this reason, Elsa decides to keep it alive for observation. Even though he is against the idea, Clive agrees, and over the next few days, they try to care for the creature, keeping its existence a secret. One morning, Clive goes to examine Fred and Ginger, along with his brother Gavin, who is also part of the team of scientists. However, soon after, Clive begins to hear screams coming from the ventilation tunnel and tries to cover it up by turning up the volume on the radio. After that, Clive calls Elsa, and the two go to see the creature, which seems to be hungry. They then make a mixture with nutrients to feed it, but the hybrid does not accept the food and begins to struggle around the room, knocking over everything in its path. In the midst of the chaos, it ends up knocking over a jar of candy that was on the table and eats it non-stop. Seeing that the hybrid likes sugar, Elsa puts the rest of the candy in the mixture and finally manages to feed it. Gradually, the scientist is becoming attached to the hybrid, although Clive remains concerned that someone will discover its existence. Shortly after, he is called to talk to William, who says he is concerned about the future of the company due to the hybrid experiment. Although the results are positive, the project needs to start turning a profit, or they won't have enough funds to keep the company going. Clive promises that he will continue to devote himself to the experiment with Fred and Ginger, and in order to avoid further problems, he continues to keep the hybrid a secret. The days pass and the little creature develops her body and mind at an impressive speed. In addition to her appearance becoming more human, Elsa realizes that she is female and begins to test her intelligence with mental challenges. The scientist then spreads drawings on the floor and tests her with associations between words and objects. As expected, the little hybrid gets them all right, and Elsa decides to try something more difficult, using small blocks of letters to form words. She puts 4 letters together, forming her name, and tries to teach the hybrid to associate the name with the person. Instead, the creature breaks everything apart and forms the word nerd, referring to the print on Elsa's shirt, which impresses her greatly. Soon after, Clive appears and gets angry with the scientist for leaving the specimen so free in the room. However, she asks her boyfriend not to call her that, and using the word nerd, Elsa makes a new combination and names it Dren. However, Clive says that Elsa is going too far, treating the specimen as if it were her pet. In addition, William informs her that he intends to renovate the place where Dren is, and they need to find a way to hide her as soon as possible. While the two argue, on the other side of the room, Gavin listens to the couple, and he enters the room, bypassing the security lock. However, he is attacked by Dren, who knocks him to the ground and threatens to use the toxin in her tail stinger. Luckily, Elsa manages to stop the little hybrid and takes her to an old warehouse, while Clive tries to calm his brother down and explain everything. Minutes later, he meets the two at the warehouse, and Elsa says that Dren has a very high fever. The two then put her in the sink with cold water, but Dren gets worse and worse and starts to feel short of breath. Faced with this desperate situation, Clive pushes the little hybrid into the water and holds her tail, as if trying to drown her. Elsa gets nervous and tries to stop him, but Dren stops struggling and appears to have drowned. However, seconds later she regains consciousness and begins to breathe underwater, with Clive saying that her lungs are similar to those of an amphibian. Seeing that Dren is fine, Elsa is relieved and decides to turn the old warehouse into a room where she can feel more comfortable. Over time, the hybrid continues to grow, looking more like a human in her teenage years. Elsa begins to treat her as if she were her daughter, and after a long day, she puts her to bed and goes to rest with Dren. After so much effort, the two finally get some rest and enjoy the romantic moment, but Clive notices that Dren is watching them from across the room. When he looks back at the room, the girl has disappeared, which only makes Clive more concerned about her. Finally, the moment arrives for Fred and Ginger's big presentation at a conference with investors. While Clive and Elsa explain the details of the experiment, the two hybrids are in a glass enclosure, separated by barriers. Finally, Joan orders her team to remove the barriers, but when the two creatures meet, they release the stingers from their bodies and begin to attack each other ferociously. The audience is horrified by what they are seeing, and things only get worse when the glass stand falls over, spilling the hybrid's blood everywhere. After this disaster, Joan and William demand answers, and Elsa believes that Ginger has undergone hormonal changes. Because of this, the two hybrids became hostile when they met and attacked each other until the end. Elsa says it is still possible to create new specimens, but Joan has lost her patience and orders them to synthesize the protein from the remaining enzymes, or they will both be fired. In addition, she and William decide to keep an even closer watch on the lab, and it is only a matter of time before they find out about Dren. Faced with this, Clive, Gavin, and Elsa meet in the warehouse to think of a way to hide her. Finally, Elsa decides to take Dren to her mother's old farm, where they can leave her in safety. After hours of traveling, they arrive at the location and take Dren to the old barn, but she doesn't like the place and runs away into the forest in the middle of the night. Clive and Elsa run after her and find her crouched on the ground, as if she were eating something. Upon closer inspection, they see Dren devouring a forest rabbit, revealing that she is awakening her carnivorous instinct. Elsa doesn't like this at all and sends her back to the barn, scolding her for her bad behavior. However, Clive thinks it's better to leave Dren alone, and the two go to take a look at the farmhouse, which has been abandoned for years. It seems that Elsa had a difficult childhood with her mother, and because of this, she feels an urge to control things, but without being controlled herself. Somehow, this personality seems to be replicated by Dren, who the next day is left alone in the barn. Throughout the night, Clive and Elsa finish setting up the place to make it more comfortable, as well as installing security cameras. However, even this does not put Dren at ease, and suddenly, a kitten invades the barn in search of food. In a quick movement, Dren captures her and takes her to a hidden part of the stable, but instead of attacking her, she hugs her in a gesture of affection. Later, Elsa prepares Dren's dinner, but the girl refuses and strings words together at the table, indicating that she is feeling bored. She also shows that she wants to leave the barn, but Elsa refuses, knowing that it is too dangerous. Furious, Dren begins to knock everything over inside the barn, and with a jump, she reaches the roof and threatens to run away. With great effort, Clive and Elsa manage to climb up and call for Dren, who, frightened, loses her balance and is about to fall off the roof. However, her body undergoes another transformation, and she grows wings on her arms and gills on her back. Despite her human genes, Dren is also developing animal DNA, and for a moment, she spreads her wings and threatens to flee. However, Clive calms her down, saying that she must stay, because he and Elsa love her and only want to protect her. Upon hearing these words, Dren retracts her wings and gills and runs towards Clive, giving him a hug. Another day passes, and Clive returns to work in the lab, while Elsa stays to spend time with Dren. She teaches her how to apply makeup, and the result makes her look even more like a human being. However, Dren is frightened by her new appearance and runs upstairs, where she hugs her pet cat. However, upon seeing the animal, Elsa takes it from the girl, knowing that it is not safe due to her taste for meat, which only makes Dren even sadder. At dusk, Clive arrives home and sees Elsa sleeping in her old room, next to the kitten she found. He covers her with a sheet and goes to check on Dren, finding her isolated in a corner of the stable. To try to cheer her up, he turns on the old record player and invites her to dance. This moment makes Dren very excited, but Clive notices a certain familiarity in her. In addition, the girl begins to get closer and closer, and faced with this uncomfortable situation, the scientist interrupts the dance and returns to his room. The next morning, Elsa goes to make coffee, and Clive confronts her about the human DNA used on Dren. He discovered that the genetic material belonged to Elsa, and once again he is enraged by the scientist's irresponsibility and leaves for work. After the argument, Elsa goes to meet Dren, who appears near the roof, using her legs to support herself. The scientist calls her over to apologize and even returns her kitten, believing that it will not harm her. Unfortunately, in an act of rebellion, Dren attacks the poor animal with her stinger and eliminates it with poison. This attitude infuriates Elsa, and she responds by slapping Dren in the face, who jumps on top of her, threatening to attack her with her stinger. Instead, she takes the keys to the barn and tries to escape, but Elsa knocks her down with a shovel, leaving her unconscious. Shortly after, the scientist ties her to a table and begins to record that the specimen has become more aggressive due to the mixture of animal species in its DNA. To avoid further problems, Elsa anesthetizes Dren and finally removes her tail so she can't hurt anyone else. As she finishes her experiment, Clive appears and is shocked to see what Elsa has just done. However, the scientist says that Dren is out of control, and with her tail removed, she can finally find the enzyme the company needs. With this material, Elsa returns to the lab to complete her research, while Clive stays with Dren and covers her body with a sheet. Hours pass and Elsa uses Dren's removed tail to extract the enzyme and develop a new protein. The process takes all day, and when she leaves the next morning, she runs into William, who is surprised to see her in the lab. Clive had said that she was away because she had fallen ill, even at such a critical time for the company. For this reason, he threatens to fire her, along with her boyfriend, but Elsa warns him that he won't do that, as she has just developed the protein, and it is already stored in the freezer. With this, the company will make millions in drug sales, and Elsa then leaves, knowing that she will receive a large sum for this discovery. Meanwhile, Clive waited all night for her and ended up falling asleep on the couch. When he wakes up in the morning, it is cold outside, and he goes to the barn to see if Elsa has arrived. However, instead of her, Clive encounters Dren who, having Elsa's genetic material, feels attracted to the scientist and kisses him. At first, Clive rejects her, but due to her resemblance to Elsa, he ends up giving in, just as his girlfriend appears in the barn. Horrified to see what is happening, Elsa leaves and Clive tries to explain himself, but she speeds off in her car, returning to her apartment in the city. Hours later, Clive follows her in his van and returns to the apartment, where he finds Elsa at the table, devastated by everything that has happened. She accuses him of having crossed every possible line, but Clive replies that Elsa did it first by creating Dren. The scientist tries to defend herself, saying that she truly loved Dren, but they were faced with something they couldn't understand. Elsa also reveals that she was able to synthesize the protein thanks to Dren's sample, as her enzymes were more abundant than in any other hybrid. With that, they can finally end the experiment, but there is still one issue to be resolved. Faced with the threat that Dren poses to her and other living beings, Clive and Elsa agree to eliminate her before things get even worse. So, at dusk, the two scientists return to the barn and call for Dren, but they can't find her anywhere. Clive goes to check her bed, but all he finds are stuffed animals under a sheet. Suddenly, Elsa calls out to him, saying she found Dren inside the tank, but she doesn't seem to be well. As she pulls her out, the scientist realizes that cellular deterioration is causing Dren's body to age rapidly, and she only has a few hours to live. The two then keep her company throughout the night, and after hours of waiting, Dren stops breathing and Elsa cries over her perishment. Finally, all that remains is to bury her body in the farm fields, and after that, Clive builds a huge bonfire and begins to burn all of Dren's belongings. Meanwhile, Elsa finishes removing her things from the barn when suddenly, the two hear the sound of a car approaching. Inside is Gavin, who says he was forced to tell William the truth, and the man demands to know where the hybrid is. Elsa and Clive try to cover it up, but William reveals that he has checked the synthesized protein and found that it contains human DNA. He is furious that they conducted the experiment in secret and demands to know where the specimen is, but Elsa tells him that it is no longer alive. To prove it, she hands him the shovel and tells him he can find Dren buried behind the barn. However, before he can get there, everyone hears a loud noise coming from afar, and then Dren appears and captures William with her claws. Clive, Elsa, and Gavin rush to help him, but all they find are William's remains, thrown on top of a tree. After that, Dren appears on the roof, revealing her new transformation into a wild creature. She then disappears, but seconds later, she flies towards the group and captures Gavin, taking him towards the forest. Clive despairs and runs to save his brother, but Elsa insists that it is too late and that they need to escape as soon as possible. Clive says he does not intend to abandon his brother, and in the middle of the argument, the madman ends up dropping his flashlight into the water. He tries to get it back, but is pulled in by Dren, who manages to stay underwater thanks to her gills. Elsa despairs, believing that Clive has not survived, but he appears shortly after and manages to get out of the lake. Then Dren submerges, and just as happened with Ginger, his genetic material causes him to change gender, and he sets out to attack Elsa. The scientist tries to escape, but ends up hitting her face against a tree and falls to the ground, disoriented. The creature then appears, and with its regenerated stinger, it advances on Elsa, but Clive appears by surprise and strikes its body with a sharp piece of wood. Despite his injury, Dren tries to resist and advances on Clive, but before he can eliminate him, Elsa attacks the creature with a rock. About to deliver the final blow, the scientist hesitates for a second, giving Dren the chance to hit Clive with his stinger, poisoning and eliminating him. Seeing the monster she has created, Elsa uses all her strength and destroys Dren's head with a rock, putting an end to his existence. Days after this tragedy, Elsa meets with Joan, who says she is satisfied with the material collected from the specimen. Thanks to this, the company has enough protein to manufacture medicines and profit from patents for many years. In return, she gives Elsa a large sum of money and the chance to continue her research, as long as she keeps the whole incident a secret. Elsa then stands up, revealing that she is pregnant with Clive's child, and despite everything she has been through, she accepts the offer and intends to continue with her life's work. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.